It's another fabric fodder session. And in today's session, we are going to be creating fusible stickers for our fabric. I don't quite know what else to call them. We are going to be painting on fusible web, and then you can cut them out, tear them, even die cut them if you want to create painted stickers that can be fused onto fabric as a feature or enhancement or pretty much anything you want it to be. So enjoy. Oh, also, don't forget to like and follow my channel. Thanks a bunch. Welcome to another fabric fodder session. And in this one, I'm going to show you a really fun way to make what I call stickers for your fabric. And what we're going to be doing is we are painting a fusible material that you can then cut out, tear, whatever, die cut, whatever you want to do, and then it is fused on to fabric, and it gives you the look of it being cut from a piece of painted paper fabric, when in reality it is a fusible material that's then been painted and fused down. Now, let me show you another example of where I've used this. We'll come back to my moth, which I have upside down. There are parts on these wings that I did this with, where I painted with this metallic paint onto a fusible and then fuse this in place and then stitched onto it. So this silvery part, as well as the part around this velvet circle on the wing, were parts that I painted on fusible. This is something that, boy, I don't remember exactly when I started doing it. I didn't invent the idea, but I have no recollection. I've seen it in multiple books since then, and I would dearly love to give credit where credit's due, but I don't know the particular person and where it all started from. But anyway, how this all works is you will be using a fusible film, web, all that kind of thing. I have used Fusible for a squillion and 2 years for doing fusible applique. I think it's called collage nowadays. I, took that 15-year break in the quilting, and it's the same thing, but they changed some of the terms. So anyway, these are some that I have just gotten locally, some different types of fusible webs. There's many others out there on the market. Sometimes they're a little bit different in Europe. So if you're in Europe, it's still the same sort of thing. Sometimes the names have changed. Sometimes it's similar to something that used to be around, but it's not around any longer. But there are a multitude of different kinds of fusible webs out there. Nobody sends me these. These are just in my opinion, the ones that I can either A, find, or B, my preferred use. My personal favorite is the Denison products from the Warm Company. The Warm Company also makes a batting that I like, Warm and Natural, but that's neither here nor there. Now there is Denison, and there's Denison 2. The reason why I like the Denison products are you use steam to help to fuse them. Now that is something you definitely, if you're not using a Denison, you want to make sure you're following the manufacturer's instruction for fusing, because some of them, if you use steam, it basically makes them kind of disappear. So some require dry iron. Denison requires steam to help it completely set. And you also want to make sure you're following the amount of time it takes to fuse it and not under or over cook it. Now, with the Denison products, you do want to make sure you have some alcohol wipes or something if you're going to be stitching through it, because it can add a little residue to your needle. If you've fused it properly, you have less gumming of your needle. If you don't fuse it properly, you have more issues. But that's only if you're going to be stitching through it. So there is Steam-A-Seam, regular Steam-A-Seam there, and then there's also Steam-A-Seam 2, and then there's Steam-A-Seam Light. One means, and this it comes on rolls, it comes on sheets, it comes in larger sheets, etc. Now Steam-A-Seam 1, which I have here on a roll, it's not tacky on one side, it's only tacky, and it stays tacky. And the idea behind that is when you are doing a fusible applique, is you can put this on the back of your fabric, and you can place it, and it'll stay in place till you can get it pressed. The idea behind the Steam-A-Seam 2, and this is the light, but the idea behind it is it's tacky on both sides of the film so that you can apply it to the back of a fabric so it's sticky on both sides. But you can apply it to the back of a fabric, cut out whatever shape you're wanting to do, and then stick it down to where you want to place it without having to fuse it. That way you're not wasting fabric, because you then, before you fuse it, you can just peel this off. And so if it has Steam-A-Seam 2, it means it's tacky on both sides. Regular Steam-A-Seam means it's only tacky on one side. The regular Steam-A-Seam weight is heavier than the light. It's got a little bit, I don't know if this is going to show on camera or not, it's got a little bit of texture to it. And then the Steam-A-Seam Light, usually with the two, one side will peel off easier than the other because it's a little less of a thickness of the film. It's got a little less texture, but we'll talk more about that. I'm going to be doing, as part of all of this, I will be doing an episode on fusible applique, and we can talk a little bit more about using this stuff when you're going to be stitching it. But again, comes in rolls, comes in sheets, comes in tapes, that sort of thing. Pellon also makes some fusibles. Not some of my favorites, but they work. And this is again one that's got release sheets on both sides, so it's tacky on both sides. And it's less of kind of a, the Steam-A-Seam's almost got like a punched grid almost like to it. This is sometimes hard by finger. The Pellon has more of a web-like surface. It's a little heavy for my taste as well. It makes my fabric a little stiffer, but it's kind of a case of whatever you can find. There's also things called Bond-A-Web. That's more of a European thing. Heat and Bond is also one that's easy to find. Heat and Bond comes in a multitude of different weights, and it's got tackiness on one side and not the other. And it's not super tacky, but it's almost got like a, I don't know, it's almost like, you know, when you use a roller and you got too much paint, that kind of tacky texture. I don't know how else to describe it, but that's what kind of texture it has. And again, this, the regular, this is the Ultra Hold, so it has, it's pretty heavy, but you can get Heat and Bond from light up to super duper heavy and makes it really stiff. So, and it's pretty easy to find. Again, not my favorite. Misty Fuse is another one that I use a lot. This is an extremely lightweight one. It is not tacky at all, and it also comes in black. And this one is very much of a web-like texture to it. But as you can see here, let me try to get just one layer. Oh, nope, I got two layers. It's a very thin layer. Now, I don't use this one in the same way, but I'll show you here in a minute what we're going to be doing in terms of painting it. It doesn't work in the exact same way, but it has some really cool effects that I'll show you here in just a sec. Let me get this put away, put these away. So what we do to start with, so I'm going to have I'm doing this in little half sheets. And what you'll do is, to start with, you're going to peel off one layer. If it's Denison 2, it'll be tacky. If it's 1, you won't have, for instance, with this one. This is just the instructions. This is not tacky at all. So I'm going to set this one aside. We'll just cut off a piece of this for me to demo on, because I have a whole roll of it. But then in my experimenting with this, I found I can paint directly onto the film, but then it's harder to get the coverage. What I've found, if I do a prep layer on here first, then I can get a better adherence of the paint, and it's much more successful. So I have several examples here. And I did some splatter and they were sitting out. So I have splatter on all of them. Now this one is with, let me start with the first one here. This one is with matte medium, which many of us use in mixed media. And with the matte medium, it's going to give you a clear coating on there. And this was Denison 2. And so it's no longer tacky on this one side, but it remains clear with the matte medium. The next one I have here, this is with just a regular white gesso, and it will make it more opaque and your colors will pop. If you're using any kind of transparent paint on this, it'll stay kind of transparent, which if you want that kind of effect, it really works cool. But with the white gesso, it does make it opaque and it almost looks like a canvas. And so it takes the paint really well. And that's just regular white gesso. Now here's with black gesso. If I really wanted the black to be opaque, I don't know if the little polka dots where it didn't go down in the holes shows. With the black gesso, what you can do is you can put a second coat of the gesso on. But again, it will give you a more opaque finish to work from, and if you want that black background for your painting, cool. So this next one, I used a clear gesso. It gives me a similar effect to the matte medium, but it does give a little bit more even coverage than the matte medium. But if you don't have clear gesso, and it also stays pretty translucent, even when you have transparent paints on it. And then this one is with the Denison Light, which is the lighter version of this, and it is also with the clear gesso on there. So it's a little bit lighter film. So if you're wanting it to be able to tear or something like that, like as if it were like washi tape or something, this stuff works great. So whether you're using Denison Light or regular Denison, both of them work. So I have, in here I have clear gesso, black gesso, white gesso, and matte medium. Through experimentation, I have just found that having that prep layer of the gesso or the matte medium just gives you a better success rate of the adherence of the paint to the film. Does that make sense to everybody? So when you're putting on your gesso or other material, I tend to use, I'm just going to do a little end of this, just squirt on there, and then I just throw a little of my fabric medium in there, and then I like to use a foam brush. It smooths it out, kind of mix it with the medium, and then you're just going to brush it on in a nice even coat as you can get it. The gesso seems to level out a little bit better than the matte medium does. So I would cover, if I were doing this whole piece, I'd cover the whole thing, and then you're going to let it dry completely. And my preference is to let it air dry completely for a couple hours so that it's nice and completely dry. Because this is a film that is subject to melting with heat, using a heat gun or something doesn't work real well. So let me go ahead. Oh, a couple other things too. Again, with this, it's tearable. It's just a film, so you can tear it to give a torn edge. But if you don't want it to be able to tear, you can also layer in either a chiffon, I don't know what else to call this, but a chiffon, like a thin layer. This is a nylon-ish or polyester fabric. I don't think I'd use silk because that costs too much. But you can use a thin fabric like this, or you can also use a non-fusible, light featherweight type Pellon material. And what I've got here is those two things. This is the chiffon, to where I've then, again, with a clear gesso or a matte medium, I've just adhered that on there, basically using it like a glue. And that's with the chiffon, and this one is with the non-fusible Pellon type material. The Pellon can tear, but not terribly easily, whereas this woven, this is not going to tear or go anywhere. So you can reinforce them before you paint them with a lightweight woven or Pellon type material. And it's just depending on how you're going to be using it. But basically, here's an example of one that I've made here. Basically what I've done is I've made a background of just with some paints, putting it on with either a brayer or with brushes, or you can actually even do this on a gel plate, all of that kind of thing. Basically, whatever you can do onto paper or fabric, you can also do on to your sheet of the Fusible. So I've just created a background on here. And then on top of that, I did some stenciling. And then I also took my Posca type markers and did a little bit of drawing on top of it. Again, I want it to thoroughly dry. And at this point, now that it's dry, I can cut this into any shape. I can die cut it. I can use it in any way. I can also, let's see what's a corner that I don't necessarily want. I can also tear it. So if you like tearing like bits of washi tape, you can do the same thing with this. It does kind of tend to want to tear one way more than the other, but these are little pieces that can then, especially onto dark fabrics, it's a way to keep the vibrant color onto your darker fabrics, whereas trying to paint onto a darker fabric, unless you're using very opaque fabric paints, it tends to not want to show up real great. And then you're just going to fuse it. You always want to make sure you're doing some sort of cover cloth. I personally, my preference is to use one of the non-stick things as a cover cloth, so you can press it with the appropriate iron temperature. Once it's fused down, I usually will then switch to a paper towel or a cloth so that it can allow the steam to come through, because this won't allow the steam, just the heat. But it's a great way to get those bright, vibrant colors, especially onto a darker background. And this one was with, in terms of getting these vibrant colors, this was on the white gesso. The clear gesso, it's not going to be quite as vibrant. And on the black gesso, again, you kind of got to experiment with what paints you're using, depending on how opaque they are, as to how much it will show up. But if you're doing something that you're having to cut it out, you're like painting something and you want to cut it out, and it's going to go onto a dark fabric, doing it onto a black gesso might help you to not have to be super precise in your cutting. You'll just have to experiment with your paints that you have or that you are using in order to make it so it doesn't show so much. One other real quick thing that I do want to show you is that Misty Fuse, which was the real lightweight one that comes in the black or the white. You can paint that. Now, I typically, when I'm painting it, I put it on a piece of, I always save the release papers because they are, they're very similar to the palette paper. So I can use it as a palette. It also can work as something, for instance, I will take a layer of this and lay it down, and I can paint it because it's going to have, because of the web-like consistency of that, the paint will come through. But what's really cool is once it's painted and I fuse it down, don't look at this side, that was an experiment. But when I fuse it down, it gives that web-like quality. So that is something that creates a really cool, whoops, and camera, a really cool look. I moved my camera so I'm a little further and I can't see quite as well, but it gives me a bigger field to work in. But it has that web-like look to it that gets a really cool effect, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. Because the idea behind showing you these techniques is showing you how it works, and then you can then take the technique and apply it to whatever it is that you're wanting to have it look. Now, as time goes on and I'm starting to do projects that I'll be showing, then I will be kind of pointing out these techniques. So again, we're building up a repertoire that we can use. So that's a real fun one. So, okay, so let me grab the piece of the white gesso, and we're gonna just do a quick little painting session. I've grabbed a palette of colors that I can use. I want a kind of a neutral one with this one. Oh, that purple just blobbled all over the place. Oh, come on. I got you working earlier. Don't be uncooperative. Okay, that one doesn't want to cooperate. Again, I love that color, so I'm going to have to go get a new one. Because sometimes they just don't last very long. So maybe I'll add some, because I want the lighter tone. So I'll just add some of this to it, and it'll lighten it up. And then I'm going to want some copper and some pink on there. I can use my brayer to get some of this purple in there. It's a great way to get some coverage. And whatever techniques that you like to use to create a background, for instance, on a maybe a art journal page, you can do the same sorts of things with this. Let me throw a little copper in there and just go on direct. And we're just gonna keep on playing. Pulling in some of this color, mix it up a little bit. Maybe dab it in and blend it. And then you can layer it. Just like if you wanted to layer a background on paper, you can layer. So we'll do this layer, and then we can add another layer over the top. Do some stenciling. Make some other marks. Tone down that copper a little bit. I like the sponge because it lets me kind of blend it a little bit into the background. Don't want to get it super thick. It's better to do more layers than more paint, so you can allow it to dry in between those layers. I don't want that copper pulling as far forward. I can do some more with the layers of the copper, just to kind of create, it just gives the tone of it into the background. Okay, now I'm gonna do, because I've done this so many times, I'm gonna do what I just told you not to do, but I don't recommend this. You just gotta keep the heat gun really moving, but I want it to dry so that we can keep on going. All right, so now it is mostly dry, so I'm gonna add, and it's a little bit more, I want it more neutral, so I'm gonna add some of this cream over the top, but I want that kind of blotchy. I don't know what else. That's what I like about rollers, is you can do that kind of blotchy kind of. Okay, I like that better. So we can then bring in more of this purple. Kind of blend it into a little bit. And it's just a matter of playing with it till you like how it looks. Like I said, I just wanted it to be a little bit more neutral, a little bit lighter. A little of this green. Okay, so then we'll let that dry for a second. Okay, now I got it pretty dry, and now I'm going to take and do some stenciling on top, bringing in a little turquoisey color, just like we did the stenciling. I'm just dabbing it on with my sponge, kind of letting it not be super hard edged, just kind of blending it out however I want that to go. I like that. Maybe I'll do a couple this way. A couple more just on this edge here. Just kind of, pick a palette of colors that you like. So I got that little bit of turquoisey thing in there going on. Maybe let's see what else I have here. We'll do maybe a few dots, maybe pull in another color with that new, maybe I'll do it with go in with the cream again, a little bit over the top of this with a little bit of these X's. That adds some kind of fun texture, lightens, tones down some of that turquoise a bit. Do as much as you want, till it feels the way you like it. Okay, that kind of works for me. And then I want to have another, I'm going to pop a little kind of melon kind of color in there because I like how that works with the turquoise. And maybe we'll do a little bit of grid bits with that. I'm mixing some of the cream in there with this melony color so it's not quite so intensive. Maybe do the little grid kind of in line with the X's. Just adding that little pop of the color. Oops. Just kind of doing it till it feels about the way you like it. I usually am about at the point where I'm like going, oh, one more. That's when I tell myself I need to stop. Now I want to bring a little of the copper back in. So I'm going to pop that on top of that where I had the orange so I can kind of mix them. When you mix the colors in a little bit, they tend to like kind of go together a little better. Maybe we'll do a little bit of camo letters. I don't really want my letters upside down. So basically, there we go. Kind of that, you know, here's one that's intense colors and one that's a little bit softer. So you can sit and play with these, make a bunch of them, and then use them where they fit in. Once it's all dry, you can then cut it. I leave the backing paper till I'm ready to fuse it. But as you can see, if I can get a corner to peel off. One of these corners wants to peel off because I had it peeled off earlier. This is the one. But as you can see, it's pretty opaque. And so then you can, as I said, you can die cut. Now, if you're going to die cut, I would take one of the release papers or some freezer paper or something like that and cover over it so that when it goes through the die cut machine, this is not going to get stuck onto your die. So use some sort of a release paper on there or a freezer paper in order so that it doesn't get your dies all mucked up. But super fun thing to do, because then once this is dry enough, as I said, we can take the let me dry it a little. Okay, once it's dry, which it pretty much is, you can then take some of your marker pens and, oh, this is copper. I thought I was grabbing black. Which works out fine. So then you can make kind of marks as you choose to make onto it. I said I thought I was grabbing black, so here's a black one. Nope, that's a gold one. I'm batting 1,000. Okay, now I know I have black. So then you can get fussy if you want, like I like to do on these grids is sometimes mark the grid. But you can mess around and do whatever you want. And then this is essentially sticker paper for your fabric, because then you can take it and, like I did here on this purse, I cut out the shapes and fused them down. Now, I've used this purse a lot, and and this did not have, this is one of the early ones I did, so it did not have the gesso or the matte medium first. This was just the paint directly onto the fusible web. And it's worn a little bit, but I actually kind of like the texture. But it actually has worn quite well, considering I am not nice to my purse. It gets thrown on the floor in my car. I'm not nice to my purses, which is why I make purses, because then when I trash them, I make a new one. So the biggest thing with this is just have some fun, play with it, and make yourself some stickers for your fabric. Thanks a bunch.